Hi there, and welcome to another episode of the Guns Magazine podcast. I'm your host and the editor of Guns Magazine, Brent Wheat, and we've got a really interesting one today, but I promise you, I'll keep my clothes on. We're going to talk to Zac Benton. He's a rifle instructor at world-famous FTW Ranch, but while we were talking last time I was out there, it turns out he's got an interesting backstory. He appeared on an episode of Naked and Afraid. So we're going to hear all about that and more right after this word from our sponsors. Introducing the 4Patriots Solar Go Fridge, a revolutionary solar-powered fridge on wheels that can protect your food, drinks, and medicine during power outages. This is not an ordinary cooler. The Solar Go Fridge is a refrigerator, freezer, and deep freeze all in one. It can recharge for free in sunlight and even power your phone in a pinch. Plus, its portable design means you can take it with you anywhere, ensuring your essentials stay safe and cool while camping, fishing, and hunting. Right now, you can go to 4patriots.com and use the code GUNMAG to get 10% off your first purchase on anything in the store, including the amazing Solar Go Fridge. Don't let a power outage catch you off guard. Just go to 4patriots.com and use the code GUNMAG to get 10% off. Creedmoor Sports is your destination for all things precision shooting. Whether you're new to the sport, an experienced target shooter, or a die-hard competitive shooter, Creedmoor Sports has what you need to take your game to the next level. Visit creedmoorsports.com. Well, good afternoon, Zac.
Good afternoon. How are you?
I am glorious. And how is it in Texas?
It's hot this week. We're supposed to hit 100 degrees most of the week.
Oh, my goodness. Well,
this time this year.
Wow. Well, I've been out there quite a bit in the last month or so. I went to FTW, which we're going to talk about in just a moment. And then I did manage to take a nice axis deer just around the corner. So the weather was great when I was out there. So I'm glad that I'm not out there if it's going to get that hot. But this is an interesting interview we've been talking about for a couple of months. We met out at FTW Ranch, and you were one of our instructors when I was out there. We had a great time. You're a great instructor. FTW, incredible place. But it's your backstory that really caught my ear, so to speak, and we kind of got talking about it. So you've done a lot of stuff, but there's one probably that gets probably the most raised eyebrows when you start people learn about your background. So anyway, you are a former Marine Scout sniper, correct?
Yes, sir.
And you did tour in the sandbox. And from there, you ended up doing a little show called Naked and Afraid. So you got out of the military. I don't know what happened between that and Hollywood, but why don't you start talking there about how you ended up naked on television?
Sure. I got out of the military in 2007. I did 3 tours with the Marine Corps. I was a scout sniper with them. I tried to be a civilian for a little while. I did 4 years of firefighter and EMS, and made enough money to be broke. And so decided to join my buddies back overseas as a contractor, as a sniper. And then I had the medical experience from fire and EMS to help me with that as well. So I mostly worked as a medic. And I did that for about 9 years until 2020, I think, maybe 2021. And I went home on a rotation from Kabul. I went home in May and expected to go back in October, and went over to Colombia on that summer break to do Naked and Afraid. And when I got out of the jungle, I found out we had randomly left Afghanistan, and 9 years with the agency was over and everything was done. So I had to total reset after I was, I guess mid-30s, had a kid, and got to restart because it all crumbled. But the timing of it was odd. It was 3 weeks in the jungle with no communication with my wife, and then boom, come out and find out that my life had changed in a lot of ways.
Yeah. Well, I've got to ask, because Naked and Afraid always comes up. Do you get tired of asking questions or getting asked questions about it at this point?
No, I don't. It was a great experience. Honestly, I would love to do another one. I don't mind talking about it. I don't mind answering questions. I feel bad for the people around me sometimes, like my wife. I know that she's heard all the questions and the answer 1,000 times, and I feel like my coworkers at FTW are the same way. Like,
Yeah.
we'll be sitting at dinner, and so like, so what was it like getting naked on TV? I've like all my coworkers just roll their eyes, and like, here we go.
Yeah. Well, I've asked the question at dinner, and I'm going to ask it now. So, what was it like being naked in front of an international television audience?
The naked part was super weird for about 2 days, and then you really don't care. I mean, just like anything, you don't notice it anymore. Not with yourself, with your partner. About the only time that it was still a little weird was collecting firewood. I would try to position my hips to not starfish the cameraman, and that's just out of consideration for him.
Yeah.
And the editing team, right?
Yeah.
But it was weird. When it aired, I think I was more nervous than when I was going to do the challenge.
No
and
kidding.
I knew the outcome, and it was a positive one. I completed it, but I was still very nervous about being on TV and it airing and being naked. And luckily, it went pretty well. The gay community was oddly very supportive.
Okay.
I'm not gay, but they reached out a lot and still do sometimes. But working through that.
Oh.
They're not shy.
I did not expect the interview to go that direction, but good. We're all inclusive here. But no, so I assume your military experience played a huge background because you were out there like what, 22 days or something?
21 days, yeah. I think conditioning your mind to just endure the suck. People do mental training, hardening, mind hardening, and having the military to draw from for that, I'm sure was useful. In one side, I knew I couldn't quit. There was no getting out of the challenge. Was 21 days. It was ambulance or finish line, right? The communities that I'm a part of would never have allowed me to do anything but.
True.
And I knew that, and I'm okay with that, and I appreciate it. I wouldn't have wanted to quit. So
yeah, but you had to have that moment, right? When it's like, if I quit, I've just cashed in all of my chips and torn my man card in half. Or did you even think that far ahead? Was the suck so bad at that moment? You're like, man, I'm not taking another night out here.
I remember the moment. It was day 10, and I think the crew had asked me about it, and I told them, like, yeah, I'm done right now. I don't want to be here. This sucks. On a level of 1 to 10 suckage, this is a solid 12. I hadn't eaten in 10 days. I had nothing but berries. I think I had a small snake that was about 12 inches long on day 9, maybe.
Wow.
But that was it. I averaged about 200 calories a day, and I lost 30 pounds over the whole
my goodness
experience.
And you're not round like I am. I imagine you were skin and bones.
I went in a little bit, like I had just left Kabul, and the compound I was on, the government has 24-hour chef. And so I could go in at 2 a.m. and get a New York strip if I wanted. And I took full advantage of that. And so I was a little over 200 pounds when I went in, but I came out under 170.
Wow.
And so, yeah, about day 10, I was done. But like you said, the Marine Corps community, the sniper community, I'm a father. You don't quit.
Yeah. So I have not watched your episode, forgive me, but so you were paired with a female, right? Or do you guys separate camps?
No, I had a female partner. That's generally how the show or the challenge operates. One man is put with one woman, and you're not necessarily opponents. You're not necessarily teammates. You're there to do it together if you can. Obviously, not everyone does. Personalities clash, capabilities clash, but
which makes for great television. Speaking as a producer,
yeah, it does. The drama, they don't have to write the drama; it writes itself.
Yeah. Well, I was going to ask that because I've been involved in television in various and sundry forms over the years. I always tell my friends, and they're either incredulous or angry when I tell them virtually everything you see on TV, including reality shows, aren't they're all scripted. Now, this would probably go more toward the end of not being scripted. How did all that work? How much guidance did you get from producers?
Very little. The only guidance that they give is really for your insert and your extract. And that's because they have to get shots at different angles, right? And so if
Yeah.
I'm walking through a marsh, they may ask me to wait so they can get a drone up ahead so they can get that footage. But other than that, once you're at camp and you're set, it's kind of it. The only time that they had us redo was when my partner quit, and they knew that that was where that episode, or at least that day, was going. They had us kind of have that conversation a few times so that they could get it, I guess, from different angles, or maybe have me ask other questions or prompt whatever, because they knew that she was going home. But the day to day, I mean, there's nothing. They're just there to watch, follow you around. They ask you questions. They kind of entice you to speak a little bit about what you're doing so that you can tell
Yeah.
the story. But there's no script.
Day 10 or 12 on, did that get pretty tedious?
For sure. That was where it really became a battle with the clock and with your mind. Around day 16, food consumed my mind, whether I was awake or asleep. I didn't sleep very much. But yeah, around day 16, 17 was the transition of I need to start reserving for this extraction and just not get hurt. I got a little clumsy. I had a big knife, the Skull Crusher from Tops. It's designed by EJ. It's a heavy knife. It's probably, I don't know, pound and a half, 2 pounds, something like that.
Yeah.
And I was so weak from no food. I remember it fell through the kind of tile that I was trying to build a roof with, and it stuck in the ground next to my foot, and it like vibrated the ground. And I felt it, and I looked down, and I looked over at the cameraman, and he looked at me over the side of the camera. Was like, "Whoa!" That almost ended the whole day.
Wow.
And I was like, "All right, I've got to start to kind of play with gain versus risk, or risk and reward, as to where I put my energy, because I was getting clumsy." So, yeah.
So you've talked about the day you were ready to pack it in, but is there a single incident during that time that you just that made you ready to pack it in, or just what was the worst single moment of that 21 days?
The worst, most difficult moment was the storm, by far. But there was never a moment where I thought that was it. It was just, man, I'm going to be real glad when this is over.
Yeah.
On day 3, I still had my partner, and she helped me a great deal get through that storm. And maybe that was her whole contribution to this for me, was to get me through that night. But a big storm blew in on day 3, and I had built a chimney out by the marsh where we had water, but our camp was maybe 100 meters into the jungle from there. And so my partner was down. She had a UTI. She was sick. She was throwing up. And so she was back at camp, and I was trying to leave her there and not disturb her. And so I built a chimney out by the marsh with clay and sand and ash to try and expedite our water processing. And it worked. It took me from a 2-hour processing pot of water. I could do 1 an hour after that, by using that chimney as a cooktop and just kind of speeding up the whole process. But when the storm blew in, we had lost our fire at camp. And so I told her, like, hey, this fire is our lifeline. If we lose the fire, we can't make water and drink water and stay hydrated, and the clock's ticking for us having to leave. Yeah. She understood that, and so was like, let's go out to the marsh and just tend this fire through the storm, and hopefully, we can save it and it'll be all right. We had no idea how big that storm was. And when we stepped out of the jungle to the edge of the marsh, the wind was like 40 miles an hour. Wow. And so it was maybe 10 minutes, and we were both shivering. And I looked at her. It was now dark. It's pitch black, and it's a lightning storm, and it's pouring down rain, and it's windy, and we're in the Colombian jungle. And I look at her, and our chimney is pretty well out. and it's like, we need to get out of this because there's no way I can spend my night here. She was all
Yeah.
because we were both miserable. And so we had to get back to camp, and we could only see, I had the flashlight, or I had the, I didn't have a flashlight. I had the camera. They gave me a little private camera, and I had it in LCD night mode. And I was shining it at the trail with the camera screen, the LCD screen flipped backwards to use that green as a flashlight. And I was trying to see where we were going, and I had her hand in one hand and the light or the camera in the other. And each time the lightning would flash, I'd get like a 10-foot view of where to walk. So we'd walk 10 steps, and then we'd wait for the lightning, and it would flash, and we'd walk 10 more steps down this trail until we got back to our camp. And that the fire was gone, but I wiped all the ashes away, and the ground where the fire had been for 3 days was super hot. You could still barely touch it. And so we both laid down on that spot on the ground and stayed warm on top of where the fire was while we waited for the storm to pass. And it took all night. It didn't stop raining until the next day, and we had lost our fire and had a whole reset. And she quit that morning, but that night.
Oh, so that was it for her.
That was it. Yeah. After that, she's like, I'm out. Yeah. And I don't blame her. That was the coldest I was throughout the whole challenge. I wasn't shivering. I was shuddering. And we spooned, and she wrapped her arms around me, and we just laid there and tried to keep each other warm till the sun came out.
Huh. So how did you make fire?
They gave us a magnesium block that you can scrape shards off, and then on the other side has a ferrocerium rod, and it just throws sparks. I found a bird nest on the hike in that I stuck in my bag, and turned big sticks into little sticks until I got a good enough tinder bundle. And that magnesium helps a lot. You get a good buildup of that.
Right.
It'll light just about anything as long as you've got the kindling there.
So what was your partner's name? I've got a picture of her here.
Yeah, Anne.
So I've got to ask the question that I'm sure gets brought up.
Sure.
So she's attractive. You're an attractive man. I'm guessing after about 10 minutes, there's none of the thinking, or does that drive last longer?
No, honestly, by, like I said, day 2 or 3, like, you don't even notice. It would be like sitting in the living room with all of your friends and someone threw porn on the television. You'd probably pay attention for 5 or 10 minutes. Then there's that like awkward moment to like, why are we all sitting here watching this right now? And then you go back to having a conversation, and it would just be this weird thing in the background. And that's kind of what it became. Like, we were all naked, but nobody cared anymore. They had all, the crew, that's their job. Yeah. And as a medic, I can relate to how many times have I done a 12 lead on some old lady's boob. Like, you don't care. And you don't remember it by the end of the day, and you certainly don't think of it ever again. And that's where I try to put myself when I go through things like a prostate exam or getting naked on TV. Is like, they're used to it. It's just me who's not.
Yeah. Well, I didn't consider you'd go to that analogy, but that works really, really well.
Though, right?
Yeah, exactly. So how is it? I guess I should have started off this way. How did you end up in the process? I'm sure there was an audition.
There, not a whole lot of one. Really, I'd been trying to get on Alone for years, but Alone has a much larger cash prize and therefore a much larger pool of people to get through. And I never got a phone call from them. But I was on a bender watching Naked and Afraid, and I had been a fan of that show for a long time. But like most, I didn't want to get naked on TV. That wasn't appealing. And I was at home watching a binge fest on Naked and Afraid during COVID, and said, you know what, screw it. If they can do it, like I said, you're probably not going to notice after a day or two that you're naked, and it's really not a big deal. The purpose is just to get through the challenge. And I said, let's do it, and threw an application in. not really expecting to get that call back. But once they did, I felt called out. Like, you threw your name in the hat. Here you go, buddy. And so now I had to
Yeah.
answer. And so I was all in from day one.
Yeah. Be careful what you wish for.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I would have felt like a coward to have put my name in and then back out because I was scared. There was no doing that. So I learned my lesson.
Well, I can relate to that. We've all, most guys anyway, have had that moment of, I have to do this because I kind of ran my mouth and
Absolutely.
I got to go through with it, And I always jokingly say it's a matter of honor when they're like, well, you bent that nail over and you're still hammering. Well, it's a matter of honor. I'm going to win over that nail. So I'm sure that was some of it. So you obviously had a good experience. You didn't hate it. And you say you would do it again if they call?
I would, and I almost did. There's been a couple of close calls, and they have called me to do another one. It's been difficult timing wise for me.
Sure.
I've had a lot of family things going on, and just wasn't in a position to step away because it's a long time.
Yeah,
21 days is still 3 weeks with no communication, and the next layer of challenge, they have a 40-day and a 60. And
my.
40 days with no communication. I've got a wife and a small boy. But then there's travel on the back end and the front end of that. So you're looking at almost 2 months that you're gone and no comms for the majority of that. So it's more a challenge of getting my family in a place that we're all comfortable with that.
Yeah.
So, but I'd love to do another one.
Well, maybe they'll hear or see you on the Guns Magazine podcast, and maybe we can facilitate that.
Yeah, I hope so.
So in retrospect and hindsight, what was probably the most surprising thing, either in terms of the actual survival aspect or the television production process? What did you really walk away going, wow, I had no idea?
Well, I think for the part that was the most surprising, or at least the takeaway as far as the challenge goes, every problem that you have, it feels like there's not a solution.
Yeah.
I felt that. And I felt like there's no way I can solve this issue. And then you lay down and you stay awake for 12 hours in the jungle in the dark, and you have nothing else to think about. You come up with ideas.
Yeah.
And a lot of them were trash. But each one of them, it took me 9 days to solve fire, but I solved it. And so the big takeaway was sort of, where there's a will, there's a way. There's always the tool there. It just might not be what you thought it was going to be. And it almost never is. And really, that's probably a big part of it's never what you think it's going to be. And that journey was the part that I loved. I had no idea that there were going to be wood eating ants throughout the entire jungle, and there was only one type of wood that I could burn that would give me a coal instead of ash.
Wow.
And so the first week was exhausting. Every 20 minutes I had to feed my fire, which meant I couldn't leave camp. And all through the night, I was feeding that fire because I had to be able to boil that next pot of water. And then the wood that I was avoiding because it was wet and heavy turned out to be the one type that was hard enough the ants couldn't eat it and would actually give me the coal that I needed. Or the grass in the field and the tree bark is how I made the shoes. Or the chimenea and the cooking method it took me from 2 hours to 1 hour. Big part was cooling the pot back in the marsh instead of just sitting it next to the fire. Because once you boil it 20 minutes, you still have to let it cool down to drink it.
Yeah.
And if you ever just set a pot on the stove or next to it to see how long it takes to cool till you want to drink it, and then you make it taste like mud, diarrhea, and put yourself in the jungle, it's not an easy task. But there's ways to do it. And that's the process that I really loved, was putting myself in that situation. The whole, burn the ships to take the island. The Vikings, when that island, they burn their ships. There's no retreat. And by taking that quit button off the table, I think that it forced me to find those solutions because I wasn't sitting there thinking, well, quitting is there. It wasn't. And if you remove it, you'll figure it out. And I think that was the big takeaway for me. And I've tried to implement it in life. It's not as easy. The malicious intervention of people seems to get in the way a lot, but
that it does. But I think your message, if I can paraphrase here, is just the idea that don't quit. And I've talked to so many people. I've used it in my own life and in my interesting experiences. The key is don't quit. If you quit, it's over. Whether that means you lose your job, but you can also lose your life. Yeah. It's just a matter of just keep going, right?
That's the moment of failure, is quitting. You're going to take losses along the way. You're going to miss that hurdle. But don't quit, and you didn't fail.
Excellent advice for all kinds of endeavors. Now let's move on to FTW, where we met. It is a ranch out in West Texas. I'm not sure if you're technically West Texas or the Hill Country, but it's a great place. They teach hunting rifles, and they do a lot of what I'd call high-speed, long-distance shooting. I got my personal best shot there, 1,900 meters. Wow. And I quit because you don't want to have to prove that you can do it a second time. But I will admit there was a bit of luck on that particular one, because when I was out there with you guys this last time, I couldn't hit 14 because the wind was blowing so hard. But that's the cool thing about FTW, aside from just the facilities and the staff, is the wind calls are just awful. They are guaranteed to drive you nuts. But I'm getting way ahead of myself. Give me the 30,000 foot view of what FTW Ranch is.
Yeah. The ranch, from a business perspective, it is probably the best precision rifle hunting or shooting school in the country. What Tim has built out there, I don't think has been matched anywhere else. And that's why it's become what it is, and why everybody who's been there says that. Mm-hmm. I've been through the Marine Corps Sniper School, the State Department, and the NSA. And what they did in 4 days was more than every one of those programs even attempted. The Marine Corps was 11 weeks long. Now, it wasn't just shooting. This is just the shooting aspect. But they put it together in a way that's very palatable. It's very understandable. It's easy to use. And I left there in my interview, which was to attend as a student, having learned something. And then I've only gotten better ever since. And so they really specialize with long range shooting and long range hunting. Not really hunting, but and then we teach tier 1 military snipers. Yeah. So we jump back and forth from world traveling big game hunters to the tier 1 military guys. And really, the big side that they can't replace is the ranges. There's 12,000 acres and 36 ranges. And like you said, the wind, if you want to train, you need that wind, because that's the variable that people struggle with. Anybody could shoot in a box and play with their come-ups and figure out, where the round's going to go and where to dial. But when you've got wind, it really makes you learn it. So just like, people ask, what should they have if they want to learn to shoot wind? And it's not that easy round that defies the wind. The 6.5 Creedmoor or PRC or whatever. Those are great rounds, but you're not going to learn wind.
Nope.
I usually steer them toward the 308 if they're trying to learn wind, because it's going to blow it all over the place, and you're going to have to account for that. And then when you move up to a 6.5 Creedmoor or something like that, it's almost child's play.
Yeah. Well, I've got a picture of one of the firing lines there, and you can't see, but over on that other hillside, is targets, and they're just standard silhouette size or maybe small plates, and you may have at minimum 3 wind calls in that distance, and I've seen them more than that. And the crazy thing is, you kind of touched on it. I don't care how good you are or think you are, you're going to learn something. So if you're a rank amateur really wanting to advance your abilities versus somebody that's been doing it for a long, long time and you've seen most of the tricks of the game, FTW will make you better. And it's one of those few places I've been where I can say that.
Oh yeah, we have a lot of fun out there. And for the events like you came, the Riders event, where I'm not so much teaching people how to shoot, everyone there knows how to shoot. We might give some pointers to just help someone hone their craft. But those are where it really gets fun, because guys get creative because they know how to shoot. And so we can play with these longer distances, and we can up the challenge a little bit, and you're not going to get bored.
Yeah.
A lot of ranges, once you figure out the wind, the day's kind of solved. Maybe it speeds up after lunch. Maybe it dies off and you get a little change. At the FTW, you just drive to another range. There's 36. Pick one.
Yeah.
There, and the wind will go like Victor India. You can shoot like a 270 degree. You can shoot a right wind, left wind, and no wind all at the same location. So it's
exactly.
Not boring.
And it changes. In the morning, it's generally relatively calm, but that's not a guarantee. And then you get upslope, downslope winds, crosswinds, and it'll give you a headache. If you're OCD about your wind calls, this place will give you a real bad headache.
Yeah, you're going to learn to swag. That scientific wild ass guess is coming in sooner or later.
Exactly. And there's a bunch of other cool stuff there. They've got the only place I've been where they've got a charging elephant and Cape buffalo that are either life size or near life size. And it's funny because it's essentially just a target that moves at you. But when it's happening, and I walked away finding myself breathing heavy. Yeah. And I thought, the plywood is not going to stomp me into a little puddle of Toll House cookie mix, but boy, you get that feeling, and that's something you can't replace with just static targets.
Yeah, we like to role play at the FTW every now and again, and I'll pretend to be a PH in Africa. We've got the buffalo and the elephant, and we have some safari plains game courses, a dangerous game and a jungle course that both have interactive targets that pop out. Because not only do we cater to the military, the sniper community, and the mountain hunting or long range shooting and hunting, but safari. Tim is the president of the Dallas Safari Club right now, and so he's very active there. We have a lot of safari hunters come through and teaching people, particularly how to go on a dangerous game hunt and hopefully come home. Because when you're hunting things that can hunt you back, it's risky, and people need to know what they're doing.
Yep. And I'm going to show the classroom / dining hall. And if you have any doubts that they know what they're talking about, and that's really what I'd call small game there. They've got Cape buffalo in the classroom. There's a elephant head mount with a nice set of tusks. And that's I guess family. It's multi-generational, but they've got crocodile. They've hunted everything, including some things you probably don't know what they are. We've had that discussion. Sitting there at classes, I've been out there several times, and I'm with guys that have been to Africa many, many times, and they're like, I have no idea what that thing is. And then you ask Tim or somebody, and they'll explain, there's only 15 hunters in the world that have taken that, and that's like the number 2. Or it's like, and it's watching us have hot dogs, okay?
Yeah. There'd probably be a shorter list to name off the things he doesn't have on the walls than the things he does. I still see things up there. I've been working there almost a year. I'm like, I've never noticed that before.
Exactly.
It's fun. It's not a boring place.
Well, and finally, you have a new project for FTW, and that's kind of the genesis of this conversation. We started talking, and FTW has a podcast now. Why don't you tell us about that?
Yeah, I started getting into podcasting after Naked and Afraid. I had been doing some work in that industry for a very well-known, famous podcaster who lives in Austin now. And then had some encouragement from some of the network at Naked and Afraid, and started my own before I got to the ranch. And then when I got to the ranch and I looked around and I saw like the roster of people coming through, the CEO for Remington, Hornady comes through, Ruger, Swarovski, Leica, Leupold, like all of these corporate events and all of these clients and very influential, well-known people. I asked them, I was like, do you all have a podcast yet? And how's it going? And they looked at me like, nah, we haven't really dabbled or considered that. And I immediately was like, that's what I'm doing here. I'm going to be an instructor and I'm going to carry that responsibility, but you guys have got to have a podcast. And so that's what I started. It took me a little bit of time to kind of convince them, what it was and how it could bring some added value to the ranch. Because we're full of stories. I mean, every night at the bar, it's what caliber are you shooting with what optic and what was the issue, or why is this working so much better for you than before, to just their hunting stories and their gear and their trips and their travel and all of it. Like, we could just be capturing all of these conversations as they come out the door instead of them, going out the door.
Yep.
And what I've been doing. It's been fun.
Very cool. Yeah, I was going to say, I've some of the outrageous lies that have been told around the bar after shooting hours. Our group was had a bunch of famous to semi-famous, and then me writers, and just some of the things that we came up with was pretty entertaining. And I got to say one other thing. I'm blessed in my career to know a lot of guys that have been there, done that, but they're not officially listed, if you know what I mean. Places where when they do the class photo, they have to blur everything out. And it's funny, once I'd been to FTW and I started talking to guys that I knew or suspected had done some interesting stuff, I'd say, well, you've been to FTW? And they just kind of smile. Mm-hmm. That's all that needed to be said. So I can only imagine some of the really cool stuff that goes on out there, but they don't mix the two, unfortunately. They won't let a out of shape 60-year-old gun rider join some of the nation's most elite long distance shooters. But what an incredible place, a great training ground, and just a cool bunch of people. And if you like to shoot and if you like to hunt and shoot rifles, you need to save up your pennies. Everybody's got to go to gun sight once at least, and everybody's got to go to FTW Ranch, and that's kind of my position. So, Zac, how do people find out more about FTW and about the podcast?
Well, you can follow the podcast on just about any podcast network, the FTW Ranch podcast, and then you can go to the website FTW SAM with 2 A's, SAAM. To look at the schedule, look at the website, look at the classes, see what we have, what you'd like to do, what you're interested in. And if you see something or there's something you don't see that you would like to do, you can call them. We've actually coming up with a special medical class right now that a client has requested. And so we're not afraid of inventing the wheel where the demand lies. So if there's something you want that you don't see, let us know. Otherwise, I can't imagine a better place if you want to learn how your stuff works. And that's really what it comes down to, is learn how it works. And it's not a mystery. Long range shooting isn't magic. It's just understanding it, and it's not hard. You can do it.
Absolutely. And I'll second, third, and fourth that. It's something that everybody's got to do at least once. So, Zac, thank you, Zac Benton. I'm glad you kept your clothes on for us. You're no longer naked or afraid. But no, I appreciate you taking the time to talk to us here on the Guns Magazine podcast. Yes, and you have a great time out in the Texas heat.
Thank you very much. It's great to see you again.
It was great talking to Zac Benton about his experiences both as a rifle instructor for FTW Ranch and as a participant in that program, Naked and Afraid. As I said, I promise you I will not get naked on the Guns Magazine podcast. Before we go, I'd like to remind you to check out our great sponsors. First and foremost, 4 Patriots. For all your survival preparedness supplies, visit 4patriots.com. That's the number 4, the word patriots.com. Use the code GUNMAG at checkout and you get 10% off your first order. And if you're a long-distance shooter, hunter, or you just like precision riflery, check out creedmoorsports.com. That's creedmoorsports.com. Well, on behalf of everybody here at Guns Magazine and FMG Publications, I'm Guns Magazine editor Brent Wheat, reminding you, now get out there and get shooting.